everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday again. Hope you've had a great week and hope you've been availing yourselves of all the practice opportunities you can find during the week. But we know that weekends very often are special, no matter how much is going on the weekend. School and work aren't, and we can get in some nice, intensive practice sessions. So before we do, we'll do a cello chat first. I'm thrilled to have with me this week as my guest, Dr. Christine Krukal. How are you doing, Christy?
I'm doing really well this week. It's been a good week and looking forward to the weekend for sure.
Terrific. All right. For the sake of the viewers, would you introduce yourself and tell about your musical background?
Absolutely. So as Dr. Whitcomb said, my name's Christine Krukal. I grew up in Canada, in Vancouver, and whenever anyone asks me how I started to play the cello, I wish I had this really inspirational story. Like I heard it on the radio or I saw it on TV and I couldn't imagine my life without cello. Well, it's true. I cannot imagine my life without cello, but it happened to be the shortest waiting list at the Music Academy when I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my mother was bringing the 3 younger kids to the Vancouver Academy of Music to sign up for piano, violin, and then here I was 2 at the time, and one of our soon-to-be good friends said, well, you should really sign up little Christy over here in the corner. It's never too early. And so she looked to see what the shortest waiting list was. And this is it was a brand new Suzuki program, and it happened to be cello. So she signed me up. And back then in the 70s, there weren't a lot of girl cellists, to be honest. And one of my grandparents was a little bit concerned about the unladylike way of holding the cello, but she got over it very quickly. So I started when I was 3 with the local Suzuki program, which was brand new. I had a wonderful teacher. Her name is Audrey Nodwell, and she's still teaching there, in fact. And she nurtured me along. And I actually took with her from the time I was 3 until I was 18. She did try to convince me to switch teachers, which developmentally probably would have been a good thing, but I just loved her so much. And to be honest, I wasn't thinking about cello as my first choice for an undergraduate degree. I actually went into science. I was interested in an area called music medicine, not music therapy, but like physical therapy for musicians. And I lasted 6 whole weeks in science. It wasn't for me. So I actually withdrew and took a year off. And then I went back, and this was at the University of British Columbia, where I grew up. And I enrolled in a cello performance degree and haven't looked back since. So I studied with Eric Wilson at University of British Columbia. And I should note that the seeds were planted when I was a senior in high school. I met this amazing human being named Phyllis Young. She actually traveled to Vancouver, and I played in a master class for her. But at that point, I was going into science, but she definitely sowed that seed, which I have been forever grateful for. And so as I was doing my undergraduate degree, I realized how much I loved it, and I really wanted to teach. I didn't know at what level, but I remember meeting this amazing woman, and she happened to reach out to me, every couple of years to see how I was doing. And that's when I was in my senior year of my undergraduate. I thought, I'm just not ready to go out into the real world yet. And I looked into master's programs, and of course remembered Mrs. Phyllis Young from the University of Texas at Austin. And that is where I met the fabulous Dr. Benjamin Whitcomb at UT Austin. So I spent 6 amazing years there. I did my master's degree with Mrs. Young, and again decided I hadn't had enough. 2 years just simply wasn't enough with this woman for pedagogy, for just life advice, cello advice, professor advice. She was really a mentor to me in many ways. So I stayed and got a doctorate and figured I better figure out what I want to do with this doctorate. And that's what landed me in the position I am in now at Augusta University. I I applied for this position straight out of grad school, and I was very lucky to be able to come here. And so I was in the music department for 18 years. And then these last 3 years, I switched gears a little bit, and I'm now an associate dean in we call it the Pamplin College, which has arts, humanities, and social sciences. So some of my colleagues will say I went to the dark side and went to administration, but I really view it as an important voice that I can give the fine arts in general and in our university. So that's kind of the very long and the very short of it, how I got to where I am today.
Terrific. And you were the director of the University of Texas at Austin String Project for a couple of years in there as well. And can you maybe talk a little bit about that experience and what you got out of that? And I wonder, did that in any way factor into the possibility, segueing you into administration later?
Absolutely. The string project set me up for so many things that at that time, I don't think I was aware of how big an effect it was going to have on my life. When I was applying to UT Austin as a master's student, it was Ann Witt was the director at that point. And so I had talked to her a lot because as an international student, there are only certain positions that you can hold. You can be a TA, but you could also be a teacher in string project. And so Dr. Witt embraced me. And when I arrived, she actually had another opportunity. So she had just left. And that's when Susan took over. So it switched, the directorship switched to graduate students for a couple of years there, which was really exciting for me, because then after our colleague Linda Jennings directed the string project, I was able to have that opportunity for 2 years after Linda directed it, which was just a beautiful handoff. And while I was a teacher in string project, it's the first time I was ever, let's admit it, I was forced to conduct the elementary orchestra. This was something I had never done before. I was frightened of it, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. So if anyone's out there thinking I couldn't possibly wave my hands in front of a group, you can, and it'll be the best experience you've ever had. Because as I went on and became a professor, I'd have our local string programs all the time. Can you come down and conduct? Can you do this all state level? I stop at middle school. I must admit, I know my limitations, and there are real conductors who have their doctorates in conducting that I will always refer to for those more advanced groups. But it gave me the confidence to do it. And then as far as directing it, that was a whole new different couple layers that I was thankfully exposed to. And I think it really helped in me securing my first job out of grad school, which is where I am today. They liked the idea that I had some administrative experience as well as playing experience. And all of my degrees were in performance. So this gave a different, again, another layer of experience. And I look back on those days, I met the most fantastic human beings, both colleagues as well as students and students' families. I still keep up with some of them. So it was a wonderful experience.
That is great. That is fun. And so I also have to ask, because I guess, if I'd heard it before, it had slipped my mind, the music medicine end of things. Do you keep up on all the various just kind of directions that research has been taking in the past years?
Not in the past years, I must admit. That's fallen off my radar a little bit. But the reason I was so interested in it as a high schooler is when I started thumb position, I had a lot of pain across the top of my wrist, and I had cysts and I had tendonitis, all these different things. And I thought, well, I have to address some of my tension issues, obviously, but also it made me, after going to physical therapy for years and years, I found it fascinating, the different exercises and how to overcome this and how to strengthen the tendons in your hands. And I know we've all known people who've struggled with anything to do with repeated motions, which as cellists, we do all the time. And to stay healthy is so important. I've also had family members who've had different injuries that have stopped them from being able to perform at the level they want to perform at. So I've learned about things like Botox injections in your forearm. There's a famous pianist who overcame some of his hand problems with this method. So there's some things I've kind of kept a little bit of an interest in, but I must admit I let that go by the wayside. But at the time, I was really fascinated by it.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, we all have to pick and choose. There's only the same number of hours in a day.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we have brought you in to work with Cello Studio at UW-Whitewater. So I've gotten to see firsthand how you inspire students. And, so when I see somebody else teach, and in some cases where I know a teacher that they had as well, obviously Mrs. Young was very inspiring. You have a lot of energy and a lot of positivity, which is so wonderful for inspiration and motivation. But then we all have our own thoughts too about our philosophy about the fire, igniting the fire, and how we not just keep going, but as vigorously as possible. So I'm curious, what's your philosophy with your cello students about motivation and inspiration?
That's a big one. Yeah. I can tell you, as a teacher, as a learner, the thing that inspires me the most and the thing that I like to give back to students are what I call those aha moments. And I know you've experienced them personally, I'm sure, but also as a teacher. And it could be something so simple, like just hearing the same thing, but said in a different way, and seeing that kind of revelation on a student's face, or if you've experienced it yourself. I love that. And I'm always striving to find different ways to say maybe the same thing, but we all know that we're all built differently. We all have different approaches. We all have different histories with our cello. And so to kind of, I'm sure this is a Dr. Duke analogy. That's another professor both Benjamin and I are familiar with at UT Austin. I'm not sure if he talked about toolboxes, and it might have been Mrs. Young talked about toolboxes, but to have a lot of different tools in your toolbox. So there might be, one task that you're trying to do, but you might need many different tools in order to do that. And it's going to work better in some situations than another situation. So that's really been a lot of what my philosophy is this is an issue. How are we going to approach it differently and never make the student feel like it's because they've done something wrong. There's never anything wrong. There's only learning, right? That needs to go on. So I took a lot of that to heart, and I love to find different ways to explain different things. Sometimes it just comes to me in the moment. Like I'll be talking, and I'm like, where is this analogy in my head? I'm like, I don't know. And then suddenly it'll be something, and you see that look, and it's like, okay, this is working for this student. And I just love helping students find their own voice on the cello, finding their own tone. And I find that inspires a student when they can hear their own progress. So, you may have heard the words golden tone many times in our history, but I try to find different techniques that students can use to find that tone that will inspire them to say something new and different on their own instruments. So I just love the process. And I love teaching. I'm not great with the young kids. I think teaching that Suzuki level kid is a gift that only certain people have, and they do amazing things with them. But I love beginners all the way up. I have some adult students. And what I've discovered with my adult students, and I'm talking about post-university age students, is words matter. I have an adult student that takes everything so literally. And I used to use the word legato, smooth, when you're bowing. And when I was on maternity leave, so another teacher said, just connect the notes. And he suddenly went, connect. And I'm like, that's what legato is. Things like that. So I learn as much from teaching as I hope my students do from me.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? Yeah, and that I like several things that you said in there. not just the enthusiasm that you model, but you're enthusiastic about the process. Yeah. And I know you have also experienced how in that the idea of the lot of tools in the toolbox, because there are some students who they have either just their background, whatever, they come to the cello very much from a technical standpoint, a series of instructions, and I execute these instructions well. And so for them, it's trying to motivate them to practice in ways that look at a different way of interpreting, or trying some out a new way to make a shape more convincing or something. And then for others, they play really very much, they pour their heart out in it, but maybe they haven't spent the time kind of with the scales or with the, string crossing exercises, bowing styles, whatever. So then to motivate them towards, but if you add more of this into your diet,
right,
it does vary, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now you play, as many of the guests have, you play solo, you play chamber music, you play orchestral. I remember we were both members of Austin Symphony, and now you play in Augusta Symphony. And then in addition to your solo playing, you have a couple of chamber music groups you play with.
Yep. I've, for me, when everyone starts, well, I shouldn't say it blanket statement, but many students said, I want to be Yo-Yo Ma, or I want to be, fill in the blank. Right. And so it's almost like there's this hierarchy where it's like, I want to be a soloist. Well, if I can't be a soloist, I want to play chamber music. And if I can't do this, and for me, that hierarchy is irrelevant. I have gotten so much enjoyment and love out of playing in many different genres, many different groups. As I get older, I sound like I'm an old lady, but I have really enjoyed the chamber music aspect of performing. There's something about making music with people you just really like hanging out with. I'm convinced this is why cello choirs are so popular, because let's face it, we're pretty cool. We're fun people. We like to hang out with each other, and we also like to play in ensembles with each other. And it's the best of all possible worlds. And I think, what job could I possibly imagine that would be better than being able to make music, something I love doing, with friends? And so it's been a wonderful evolution for me. I still play some solo recitals and things like that. Since I went into the administrative aspect of my job, as we were discussing, I've become a little bit of a weekend warrior, but cellists don't do that. Keep practicing every day, but carve out that time. It's so important to stay healthy. Physically, but also keep your technique going. But I just find that priorities in life get shifted around depending where you are in life. And for me, chamber music has become such an enjoyable part of my life. I play in a piano trio called Trio Jardin. In Augusta, it's known as the Garden City. So we thought Jardin is garden in French. So we kind of like that aspect. And they're two of my nearest and dearest friends. So I've loved playing in that. And I'm also an artistic director of the Harry Jacobs Chamber Music Society, it's called, which has been going on. We're in our 31st year. And that kind of feeds a part of my soul as well, because I get to interact with all of these world-renowned performers. We've had the Canadian Brass in most recently, as well as pianists like Roberto Plano, just these wonderful artists that I get to hang out with for a day or two. And we play that game, that musician game. Who do you know? Well, who do you know? Where did you study? And so I've really enjoyed the chamber music, but symphony, there's nothing like symphonic repertoire. I'm sorry, I'm giving it all to you. I'm just
great.
love it all. But if you can play in a symphony orchestra, whether it's a professional one or a community one, strings or full orchestra, that's an experience, like being part of a team. We need to make musicianship into a team sport. We need to encourage our next generation. Yeah, it's good to play on, sports teams and everything, but, we can also have that team aspect is so important, and the social aspect as well. So it's been a ride, to say the least, and it keeps on going.
That's very true. Let's see. So I'm also curious. You mentioned the administrative thing. Are there ways in which your administrative experience affects your studio teaching, or even the way that you participate in a chamber music rehearsal?
Right. Well, I can tell you, being on both the faculty end and the administrative end, knowing how to talk to people and interact with people is a big part of my job. And whether it's as a studio teacher or as an administrator. Sometimes as an administrator, let's face it, we get people who aren't very happy who come in because we're kind of like, they've gone through all the different, if it's a student, they've talked to their professor, they've talked to their department chair, and now they go to the dean's office. And so I get a lot of that. And listening is important, knowing how to communicate, de-escalate, things like that. And to be honest, when I first started doing that was when I was 8 years old, playing in my very first it was a piano trio, actually. You learn those communication skills from playing in ensembles and orchestras and rehearsing. I mean, I'm sure many of us in the room and online have had those moments in a chamber music rehearsal where someone might say one thing and you might not agree with them, but there's a way to find that middle ground. And I find that has helped me in all aspects, including the administrative part of my job, just kind of being Switzerland or Canada, being that neutral country is important.
Nice, very nice. All right, upcoming performances and projects.
Yeah, well, let's see. We have at the university, we have a lot of stuff going on. Now, I know Augusta's a little bit far away from Wisconsin, we have, I mentioned the Harry Jacob Chamber Music Society. We have the Parker String Quartet, which just won a Grammy, actually, or I believe it was last year. And so we have some chamber music happening on campus. Dr. Whitcomb and I will be presenting at the next American String Teachers Association National Conference coming up in Atlanta, so kind of in my backyard. So I'm looking forward to seeing not only Dr. Whitcomb, but a lot of our buddies from grad school. It's one of my favorite things to do as well. So we're keeping the Phyllis Young legacy going and talking about our experiences with her and her pedagogy. Let's see, what else do I have coming up? The symphony's doing some Mahler. That's exciting. Whenever we get to do Mahler, I always jump on that bandwagon. But a lot of it is just, it's not even end of year stuff, but there's a lot of things administratively that we take care of, all the boring budget stuff and things like that. But that takes up some of my time. But I look forward to all of our student recitals. I love seeing our students get up there and show their what they put together in the semester. We have a lot of our university ensembles performing. And so it's a full couple months coming up for me, but I enjoy every moment of it.
Excellent. Wow. That enjoying it is such an important part, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you never want it to become, it's kind of drudgery every day. That's the great thing about music, is that every day it's like Christmas. It's like a new thing. What's the next thing I get to play? What's the next thing my students get to play? So it really keeps it fresh.
That's the attitude right there. I love it. Very good. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Christy. This has been a real pleasure, as it always is, visiting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you do to motivate your students and your colleagues. I mean, podcasts, that is awesome. So I hope everyone's enjoying Dr. Whitcomb's You Had Me at Cello. I love that title as well. But thank you for spending time with me.
All right. Always my pleasure. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Couple weeks. That's right. Countdown is on. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye, everybody. Happy practicing, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good weekend.